being fatherless on Father's Day ultimately became one of my superpowers. So like, stick with me. Let me just tell you a little bit more about what I mean here. Growing up, I felt two really key stigmas. One was that I was fatherless. And that was never really defined, but I think what it meant was that there was not someone living in my house who identified as a male to take care of me. I think that was the definition, right? But how do we define fathers? Is a father somebody like that you're biologically related to? Is a father somebody who's present for you on a daily basis? Is this somebody who's present for you on a daily basis and is kind and loving and nurturing? What do we mean by that? But growing up the way I did in my community, we celebrated Father's Day with, special sermons on Sundays, and I always dreaded those days. We'd make cards for our fathers in school. I dreaded those days. But you know what? I did have somebody who identified as a male who was my best friend, my guardian, my protector, taught me how to adventure and read and hunt for rocks and be kind and why to be kind. Taught me about honor and respect and strength. He was a conscientious objector in World War II, so he went and he built railroads that got destroyed and he just rebuilt them. That was my, quote, father figure, right? But growing up the way I did, people looked at my family differently because it was just my mother and I. And this is what leads me to the second stigma, and that is that my father died when I was 2, but it wasn't just how he died. There's a whole part of gun violence around it, because well before we talked about mass shootings, and things like that, he was killed in a robbery along with 4 other people. So it was 5 people total whose lives were taken from gun violence. That's how I grew up. And no, you might be thinking that I grew up in some of the, more infamous communities in the United States where we think about those things happening. That's not the case. It was a small, quiet, rural town. And it was a tragedy. And it was trauma. And so Father's Day always reminded me of both of those things, that we couldn't talk about the trauma of the gun violence. And I still don't to this day sometimes, right? Because I'm worried about how other people will feel. So I carry the stigma. So I carried the stigma of fatherlessness, and I carried the stigma of gun violence. So on this Father's Day, I'm thinking about how all of that lived experience became my superpower. And it's not just me. So don't go there and think, oh, she's different. She's special. I mean, I am special and I am different. But what I learned, and what I think a lot of other people learn who carry around a specific stigma for themselves, and it's not just they carry it, society, puts it on them, right? So I want to make that really clear. But it becomes our superpower, because you know what I knew how to do then? I could spot the patriarchy a mile away. I could spot all these lessons about gender roles and the social conditioning that were taught over and over, overtly, like in school, in church, in family conversations, and covertly in media. People expected that I would be what? Poor, unruly, sad, an orphan kind of mentality, right? That my mother couldn't take care of me. That we needed more, that because I didn't have somebody who identified as a father living in my home, that there weren't other role models for me out there. It meant a lot of things to a lot of people. And so I carried all of that around as a stigma. But you know what? It became my superpower, because now I see how we put people into boxes based on gender, based on age, based on race, based on all these different intersections of identities. And this was really rooted in heteronormativity, right? And just so much. But because my family was different, and I lived because my family was different, and yet we mowed the lawn, My mother brought in an income. We cooked, we cleaned, we had cars, we did all the things. So now when I hear somebody say, oh, well, you have to do this because of gender. Mm-mm. So I can see it on an interpersonal level, and I can see it on a structural level. And with my PhD in women's and gender studies and the work that I've done around the world, I see the patterns of sexism. I see the patterns of misogyny. I see the patterns of paternalism. I see the patterns of all of these hierarchies that tell us what to do and how to do it. And these rules were not made by us or for us. And so my role, the reason I'm here on this planet, is to help diversify the face of leadership. I work with smart women who are tired of the world telling them they have to dumb down. And so that is my message on this Father's Day.